Hello everyone, back tuning into our latest Star Wars video. So we're going to look at whether George Lucas could be helping to work on Star Wars Episode 9 for this video. Did a video a few days ago here on the channel where we talked about George Lucas severing ties basically with Star Wars and walking away from it back in 2013 after the sale of Lucasfilm and all its assets to Disney. Originally, he was supposed to stay on as sort of a consultant and sort of a flag bearer for Star Wars, and to make sure the characters and the plots are kept consistent with his saga. But then in 2013, he sort of walked away from it. He severed all ties. And we did a video about that, sort of going over what happened there. Whether Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm president, who took over from George after the sale, whether she had betrayed George Lucas. Well, the latest sort of stories that are doing around, we've had a few of these for around sort of 6-9 months now. I've been hearing this about George Lucas actually working with JJ Abrams on Episode 9 itself. Has actually done a little bit of directs, actually shot some of the scenes. I'll go over a piece that was in the Express a couple of weeks ago, and then we'll talk a little bit about what I think could be going on here. So that's what we're going to do for this video, and we'll get on with it for you right now. So this was from the final day of February, actually. So these stories have been doing rounds for a little while, but I just wanted to address this, particularly in light of the video we did a couple of days ago, where we talked about George walking away. So the title, of course, is Star Wars 9 Leaks, George Lucas to fix Luke Skywalker and course correct after The Last Jedi. So they say here that Star Wars 9 Leaks claim George Lucas is closely involved with JJ Abrams on Episode 9 and will help bring Luke Skywalker's character back to his original vision following The Last Jedi fan backlash. So let's see what they're saying. So the article starts: is Disney seriously trying to course correct after the huge fan divisions created by Episode 8? There have been numerous reports that Abrams will bring movies back to his original vision from Episode 7. Now a new leak claims that the director will work closely with the godfather of Star Wars. Apparently they have very exciting plans for Luke Skywalker and other legacy characters. So it almost sounds like they're sort of co-directing in a way. A little bit more. Star Wars legacy characters are the original core group from the first trilogy, which also includes Lando Calrissian, Princess Leia, Han Solo, and so on. Fans already know Billy D. Williams is returning as Lando, and unused footage of Carrie Fisher will be used to create new Leia scenes. Abrams has been open about his intentions to include as many nods to the prequels and originals as possible. Now, though, it seems he will also work closely with the man who created it all to bring the entire saga home in a way that will please all the fans, especially concerning the role of Luke. Many fans were displeased that Luke appeared to have abandoned hope, ignored his responsibilities to the galaxy, and tried to kill his nephew in his sleep in The Last Jedi. We scroll down to a little bit more, so it goes on. As always, treat any leaks with a pinch of salt. The leak said George Lucas was involved in numerous sequences to fine-tune some of the legacy characters and their interactions with some of the sequel trilogy characters. So that's interesting. It's kind of like addressing the point that there has always been about these sequel films, that the new characters like Rey and Finn and Kylo Ren or Ben Solo have not really been interacted, have not been sort of interconnected with the legacy characters, with Han, Luke and Leia. That's been one of the ongoing complaints right from The Force Awakens, that they haven't sort of interconnected the legacy characters, the new characters correctly. So that's kind of addressing that point a little bit. Goes on further, George Lucas directed and guided JJ Abrams with Mark Hamill in exactly how the character of Luke Skywalker should be done. He will also be involved in some of the reshoots and editing techniques he will be overseeing during the reshoots in April. So there are going to be more reshoots. It looks like George Lucas is going to be sort of directing those in some ways and editing them himself. So it says he will also be involved in some of the reshoots editing techniques he will be overseeing during the reshoots in April and in post-production, which is set to end all the way in September and into October this year. So he'll carry on editing and reshooting all the way through to the autumn, just before the film is released. Last little bit, Lucas has always been involved, albeit very loosely, with the sequel trilogy. Well, I dispute that. However, this sounds rather extraordinary. Will Disney really bring in Lucas to be so hands-on? The reality is more likely to be somewhere in between. However, hardcore fans will be happy to know Lucas is involved in any capacity at all. End of article. So, very interesting. There's a couple of tidbits there that seem to be addressing fan concern. So, I say the first fan concern goes all the way back to The Force Awakens, which is that the sequel trilogy characters have not been connected to the legacy characters, that the legacy characters have just been pushed off to the side, really. They haven't had much to do, and the focus has been very much on those new characters, and they just haven't really connected them together as you would have expected. You would have thought that the original sequel film, The Force Awakens, as the sequel to Return of the Jedi, would have primarily focused on and I've spoken about this in videos before, it would have primarily focused on the original characters, Han, Luke, and Leia. And the new characters would have kind of like been on the edges of that to some degree. Yes, they would have played their part in the story, but they've kind of like been on the edges. And then as you move on to episodes 8 and 9, you would have slowly moved away from the legacy characters. Either they'd have perhaps, in terms of Han Solo, probably been killed off. Other characters would have gone on other missions and they'd have had less screen time. You started to sort of introduce the new characters as like the stars of the film, certainly by the time you get through to episode 9. That's the way it should have been done, but it wasn't done like that. Started off very in your face with the new characters, and the legacy characters were kind of like left to their own devices quite a lot. So that's addressing that concern, that George is going to be sort of overseeing interactions between the new characters and the old characters. The other main concern of the fandom, of course, is related to Luke Skywalker, what they did to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, the way they totally assassinated and destroyed his character. We've done the video about that already, of course. And this article, again, it's kind of like addressing that point, but George is going to be brought in as like the saviour of Luke Skywalker. He knows the character so well, along with Mark Hamill, and they're basically sort of guiding JJ Abrams into the way that the character should be depicted and what should happen with the character. And it even implies that George is going to be directing some of these scenes himself, particularly in the pickup scenes in April. Now, I'm going to sound really quite dubious about this. I smell a lot of marketing going on here. I think Disney is very aware of how divisive The Last Jedi was. I think they're very aware of the fan backlash. They know there's a lot of very unhappy fans about what happened with The Last Jedi, primarily, particularly with what happened with Luke Skywalker. And I think they're looking for a way to try and, if not sort of make all the fans happy, you'll never be able to do that, but certainly to dampen down a lot of that fan reaction that we saw to The Last Jedi. And I think they're using this idea that George is coming in and he's going to advise JJ Abrams on what to do with the characters and even do some directing himself. I mean, it does kind of imply that the film is being co-directed. There's like two directors working on this now, JJ Abrams and George Lucas, and they're kind of like co-directing the film themselves. I say I'm really, really dubious about that. I suspect George has given some advice probably to JJ. I know he does get on quite well on a personal level with JJ Abrams, and his decision to walk away from the saga wasn't anything to do with JJ Abrams at all. I don't think it happened before JJ was brought on board with The Force Awakens. So George left before JJ Abrams came on the scene, I think. So I suspect, but that said, I think George was quite unhappy with the way JJ Abrams made The Force Awakens into kind of like just very much a repetition of George's own original Star Wars film. It's almost like a love letter to Star Wars, JJ Abrams' love letter to Star Wars. And I think George was quite... I wouldn't say he was upset about it, but I suspect from what he said, he was quite disappointed that they'd gone that route and been very non-creative with The Force Awakens. They could have done so much more with it from a creative perspective. But that said, it was a huge money spinner, of course, for Disney. But anyway, getting back to the point, I think there is a pretty decent relationship between JJ Abrams and George Lucas. So I suspect they have spoken about episode 9. I suspect JJ Abrams has asked George for his views of what he would like to see happen, particularly with Luke Skywalker. I suspect it's quite likely that George has visited the set and may even have shot one or two scenes on the set. That certainly happened with Solo, a Star Wars story. But I think the reason it happened there, in that instance, was because after Kathleen Kennedy, yes, it's her again, after she fired the original directors of Solo, a Star Wars story, when the film was around 80% complete and decided to pretty much start over, she brought in Ron Howard as the director of Solo, a Star Wars story. And of course, George Lucas has a very, very long working relationship with Ron Howard. Their associates going right way back to the early 1970s when George directed American Graffiti. Ron Howard, of course, had a very big role in American Graffiti, and there's also a connection through film Willow. So George and Ron Howard go back a very, very long way. They're close friends, and they've got a long relationship with one another. So I suspect that was the reason that when George was visiting the set of Solo Star Wars story, Ron Howard got him to direct a scene or two for that film. I don't think the relationship will be anywhere as close as that with JJ Abrams. So it's possible that George has directed a scene or two on episode 9, but it's more unlikely that that would have happened than it happened on Solo, a Star Wars story, because again, there's just not that relationship between George and JJ that there is, or there was, between George and Ron Howard. So I think George is there. I think he's involved to some degree, but I think this is really overplaying it a lot, and they're doing it for marketing reasons, I think. I think the idea that the film is almost being co-directed by JJ Abrams and by George Lucas is pretty far-fetched. I doubt very much whether that is happening. I wouldn't mind it if it was. It would be good news if George really was back on the scene and was getting this thing under control, particularly in terms of the characters that he knows so well, like Luke Skywalker. It would be amazing if that was the case, but I'm just very suspicious about it. I think it sounds like marketing. It sounds like Disney marketing is trying to feed the media with stories that are going to bring the fans around before, particularly the trailer comes out, and then of course, as we ramp up towards the film later on in the year. The episode 9 scheduled to be released on December the 20th, of course. So it could be that George is heavily involved with this, but to me it just doesn't really sit right with what we know has happened and what George's attitude is to Disney Star Wars. So I'd say, yes, there's probably a little bit of involvement. There's probably been a bit of discussion with JJ Abrams. George has probably visited the set and might even have filmed a scene or two at some point on the episode 9 set. But the idea that he's sort of very heavily involved, that he's basically telling JJ Abrams what to do, and in some ways that they are co-directing the film, I think that's quite far-fetched. I could be wrong, but my guess is that this feels very much like marketing, and George is not anywhere near as involved as this is implying. But I expect to hear a lot more stories about this over the next few weeks, months. I suspect around Star Wars Celebration and around the trailer, we will hear quite a lot about George's involvement again, with stories appearing in the press. We may even hear from one or two actors saying that George is heavily involved. Kathleen Kennedy will probably do an interview somewhere implying George's involvement. This is going to be an ongoing sort of story over the next few months as we run up towards episode 9. Be interested to see what George himself says. I suspect he'll keep very quiet about it. I doubt he'll confirm or deny one way or another until maybe the film is released, and many might say something like, It was a load of marketing, and I was never involved in this film. He might do something like that, but up until then, up until the film is released, I doubt George will say much either way. But we will hear a lot, I think, about the supposed involvement of George Lucas with Episode 9. Right, so that's it. We'll be back with new Star Wars content very, very soon. Please like, share, and subscribe so that we can get the channel up and running. We've been issuing Star Wars content now for a week on this channel, and I think it's gone quite well. I hope you're enjoying it. Please give us a thumbs up and let us know that you are. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We want to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can get the channel remonetized again. We've got to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're at 600 and something, so we've got a way to go. Please do subscribe to the channel, like the videos, let us know that you're enjoying what we're doing. Don't forget to you can comment on the videos as well. Let me know what you think about this. Is George involved in Episode 9? If he is, how heavily is he involved in it? Or am I right in saying that this is probably primarily Disney marketing at work? Or am I being too cynical? Well, that's it. We'll be back with fresh Star Wars content very, very soon. So keep checking back to the channel. That's all for now, though, and thanks for watching.